Give me one sec here. All right, should we just get started and um we'll just we'll just chat and go through this slide deck. And Beach, you can feel free to interject. You got a lot of experience, and if you're like this is weird and you want to drop out, you can as well. We're gonna record it for content anyway. I'm actually live streaming on YouTube right now, some of this as well. But Coach's Box. First office hours. This is kind of the brainchild of Coach Sean here. Kind of threw the idea out there, and I don't know, we all kind of agreed that it could be a cool way to have some open discussion with coaches. And I don't know, I personally like to have conversations with other coaches because sometimes it's like, oh, you deal with that too. Wow, I'm not alone. Like think like how do you deal with that? And sometimes it seems stupid, but it's certainly helps in the long term of getting through the grind of the season. We're I don't know 8 weeks out now, 50 something days till the start of the Minnesota season. I If you're watching this and you coach in a different state, you might already be your season might have already started. At this point in early February. So I'm Ted. I'll be kind of leading the call, but Sean and PMAC, why don't you guys introduce yourselves?
Yeah, sure. So, Sean Clemenser, I'm an assistant coach here at Edina High School. As Ted was saying, I just thought it'd be kind of a good idea to kind of get just a group of coaches together and just kind of chat because, we all have our respective group texts with our staffs or anything like that, but sometimes it's just good to actually talk some stuff out with some other folks.
Austin Polson McCannon, better known as PMAC, defensive coordinator at Prior Lake. Involved in the youth program just as much as the high school program as well. So, might have some perspective on, youth stuff as we kind of go through these, next kind of 4 office hour sessions and tackle different topics. But excited to, yeah, kind of have, formal setting where we're kind of diving into different things. Like Sean said, we have different group texts, right? We've got our, podcast where we talk about lacrosse, but kind of in a different way. So I think this is a really interesting, um, you know, project that we're starting and excited to see where it kind of goes.
Cool. I'll share my screen here. We'll get started. We seeing this?
All good.
All right. We introduced ourselves. I love this quote: "Passion grows as you gain mastery and momentum." Um, I think sometimes people think that you get good at the things that you're passionate about, but I think it kind of goes the other way. Adam Grant kind of illustrates that here is that your passion grows at the things you're good at. And so investing time and effort into being better and learning and developing your passion grows as you do that. And I think it's kind of obvious for players to like develop and put time in and learn and that sort of thing and work to to get better every day. But I think as coaches we need to do that as well. um the agenda for today, we're going to talk a little bit about planning your season, kind of the to-do list and the timeline for setting your team up for success and some of the things we've all done. And then preseason practices, like what goes into that, what are the goals for those sessions, what types of things should we be running, and kind of what resources do you have, and then a Q&A at the end for open discussion. um Planning your season, I put this little asterisk here. I think we've all talked about it at some point in a group chat or with each other. Is it's not an April to June job. And if you want to be successful, if you're just showing up April 1st and you're done at the last day of state or sections, and then you don't do anything the rest of the time, it's gonna be an uphill battle, and there's gonna be a lot left on the table. It is a year round almost year-round job because there's a lot that needs to happen. And we got some people in here that have even more head coaching experience than maybe I have, and they probably would agree with this. But it's something that to be, you have to be able to plan and set the team up for success so that when the majority of that group gets there on April 1st or March 30th, whenever we start, um, that things are ready to roll and they can be empowered to, be the best that they can be. I added this slide kind of last minute from Sean's original kind of timeline, but 9 months out. So this would be basically July and August of, you just finished your season. I put this on here, take a break. Like it's okay to whether that's just enjoying your summer or you want to coach some youth, coach your kids, coach a club team. I think ESPN and Barstool and all these media outlets that interview these professional and like D1 coaches. It's like I started planning my season the day we lost in the championship game, and it's like, yeah, okay, but like you're making $7 million a year, then you have to do that. But as high school coaches, it's probably just as emotional, and it only one team gets to really say they achieved the pinnacle and are happy with how their season ended most of the time. And take a break and kind of like decompress. Don't start diving into what went wrong in the section final. Like, it's something that I think gives you like success long term to be okay stepping away.
Yeah, no, I think this is very important, maybe underrated. Um, I think on the timeline or calendar that we have in Minnesota, August is kind of the month where I really try not to do anything lacrosse, not be in the field, not really think about coaching. Um, try to organize a DTA golf event. Do some of those types of things where, you know, we sacrifice a lot. At least I sacrifice a lot from April through July, where I'm saying no to a lot of things and trying to reconnect, with family, friends, all that stuff. So August is kind of that month for me where you got to refill the batteries. Enjoy in Minnesota, right? Again, that's where we're at. Some of the last month's days of good weather too. So August, that's the month where I really try to, unplug from everything lacrosse.
Yeah, I like to piggyback on that. Like again, I'm just kind of echoing what Ted and PMAC said. Just again, like especially for like those of us like with families, like we spend a lot of time away from our families to essentially take care of other people's kids for 3 months. So it's really time to like to focus on them. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Cool. I'm glad you guys all agree. I added that and I was like, I don't know, is that weird? But I think it is important
Yeah,
as
do you even
well.
want to win?
Yeah, no, I don't know. Uh, so now, you take your break. Some people take longer breaks or need longer breaks than others. I know I have a hard time sitting still, so like I kind of start to want to look at last year and stuff. So we'll say, 6 to 8 months out, we're looking at that late fall time frame. Maybe your team is doing some fall leagues, or they're doing some kind of off-season stuff. Maybe some of your kids are playing other sports, but um, I think I'll let Sean kind of take this one a little bit. This was some of his stuff, but I think you kind of want to start that process of looking at last year, maybe looking at some of the difficult stuff, but you can also look at what went well, and kind of start to decide, kind of make some early decisions on kind of what direction you want to go.
Yeah, like for me, like the preparation really starts like after Labor Day. Like to everyone's point, all right, like I enjoyed my summer, that was great. But then once, especially like looking at the college calendar, but once people start returning to campus and you start, reading publications about like fall ball and fall practices and things like that, that's when I get the itch personally. So looking at that, all right, I'll dig up old film from last year. All right, what worked well for us? What strength can we turn to a superpower? What needs improvement? Maybe we struggle with clearing or riding, perhaps both. Again, just kind of looking into that and start kind of like noodling on like, all right, maybe I need to do some homework, look at some YouTube videos, maybe attend a clinic similar to this one. ask some buddies what they do in the past. In terms of personnel returning, everybody loses seniors every single year. So every single year you have a new team. So which ones are returning? Which sophomore are you hoping to, like, which I'll say that was a sophomore that's returning as a junior, who's hoping that you're going to make a jump, like to make an impact. Is there any freshmen on the radar that you need to be aware of? Again, just kind of like looking at that. It's pretty big, especially when it comes to schemes, knowing that, like, hey, we had like really big athletic midfielders that could dodge downhill last year. This year we don't have so many. So how are we going to kind of tweak the offense to kind of, like, again, to mold to their strengths, knowing that, like, again, each year and each team is going to be completely unique. And then when it comes to like the logistics aspect, again, it's like, because we're in Minnesota, you need a reserve field times. And as reserve your fields or indoor time, especially if you're going to be having captain practice, like in the winter, like get on that as soon as you can. Plan your fundraising. Nobody hates to raise money, basically starting in like March, just because, again, to your point, it is essentially a 12-month season, right? If you have like a trip planned or some big team building event, get that in front of parents ASAP, just so they can like get it on the calendar, especially with spring break. It seems like every 3 years, tryouts or something is going to occur over spring break. Get in front of it if you can. And then finally, just finalizing your schedule. Everybody has like their respective conference that they're in. So like you have, 6 to 10 games already locked in, but reach out to those other like out of conference games that, if you want to challenge yourself, reach out to those big dogs. The worst that they can say is no. But I mean, you still have to like get out there and like try to, get on the schedule, try to work some stuff out. Again, just kind of working some of those just initial logistics is what I would say.
I'm not a head coach, but when Sam Kepner took over Prairie Lake, it was his first time being a head coach, so we were kind of like tackling a lot of this stuff, for the first time. And the head coach before that didn't really have anything documented. He was more fly by the seat of his pants a little bit more, and leaned on our board. Right, we've had a good board, but documenting your calendar when you're reserving fields, right? Like we know we have to reserve fields for the dome in the winter in like June or July. Like it opens up, right? So like, all right, having that noted, like, all right, June, July, we gotta lock in fields, you know, um, you know, throughout the different, timeline throughout the year, documenting when you need to start thinking about the fundraising, start thinking about, when can we have tryouts, locked in, et cetera. Documenting when you're throughout the year you're going to be doing those things has really helped us stay on task of, all right, we just flipped the calendar to February. What are the things we need to be thinking about in February so we're locked in for, April?
Yeah, systems and documentation is huge. One other thing I'll add too is starting a depth chart. This is something Mitch at Farmington, my head coach, does a really good job of. He's involved in the youth, so he kind of knows all the kids. He has a really good handle on the whole program, and he just puts, the position groups down the left column and the grad years across the top. He puts seventh graders on there if there's a unique kid, but there's usually only like there's 0 or 1 kids in that group. Then there's like 3 or 4 eighth graders, maybe more on a given year, and then 9th through 12th. And that just gives us an entire look at, when you kind of look at what personnel is returning, you can kind of go like, oh, like shoot, we don't have a lot of attackmen, or we don't have a lot of poles. Like after our starting 4, we might need to move some middies that to take a poll this year or just change some positions. I think then you can start to have that conversation with kids earlier. And so you're not springing on them like the day before the season or in the season. You could say, hey, I was looking at the depth chart. You have an opportunity to play if you switch to whatever position. We just moved a kid to goalie this year that like wasn't really going to crack the lineup in the position he was at. And he's like, oh, that actually sounds really cool. I'll start training for it now. I'll start getting some clinics and things like that. So I think that starting the depth chart, just a visual, I'm a visual learner. So that helped me like look at the whole program like laid out.
We had a really good message from somebody in the group here. Another thought: having booster parents, they graduate too, right? Throughout the years, you've got your booster club. and going over the goals right for the upcoming year, with your booster club. That can change. I'm kind of paraphrasing this, but so getting the new crop together is important to go over the goals for the next season. That can change, some dynamics, for the team, season to season, right? There's tweaks that are made. One thing at Prior Lake that we do with our booster club is, once we see, let's say the treasurer is their kid's a senior coming up this year, we'll have like a freshman parent kind of shadow them for a year and then take it over right the following year after they kind of graduate. So there's a year of kind of shadowing, training, and then they'll take it over and hopefully ideally they've got 4 kids, so they'll be in that position for the next 8 years.
Yeah, I was just gonna say the same thing. We did a similar thing at Champlin Park, just ensuring that you have some like underclassmen parents. Again, like if they're not like entirely just involved or in like owning a position like VP or treasurer or what have you, they're at least there and they can see what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. That's a great call out. Um, 3 to 5 months. Now we're getting into that. It's starting to feel a little bit more like lacrosse season is around the corner, maybe more on the 3 month side than the 5 month side. Um, but again, you got to keep everybody kind of moving forward here, else the stuff catches up with you. Scheduling that player parent meeting for prospective players, returning players, new players. Um, I don't know about you guys, but parent meetings are the least fun part about coaching. Like it's intimidating. It's a lot of logistics, it's a lot of details, there's a lot of questions, but it's also like it might be the thing you fear the most, but it's probably the most impactful and like most influential thing you can do as a coach is have a great kickoff parent meeting because you can control the narrative and ease everybody else's anxiety by being really organized. And when I became a parent and had kids becoming players and doing activities, I got to sit in the other side of this, kind of on the other seat here as a parent listening. And it's amazing how a great parent meeting can kind of change the whole perception of an upcoming season, or just put you at ease to know like dates are lined up and I can get my calendar set up and I don't have to worry about it and the expectations are clear. So get this scheduled so that people have plenty of time to plan for it and be there. um, I don't know if you guys have anything else to add on the parent meeting, but I think this can get thrown away a little bit and pushed to the wayside, but I think it's probably one of the most important things at the high school level for a coach to do.
Yeah, and like yeah, I've been an assistant coach for the past like a handful of years to say the least. But I mean, again, to your point, I mean, if you can get in their good graces, and again, like yes, there are some bad apples within the parent group. We can all admit that. But again, like that's no reason to fear the parents themselves because you can get a good group of them in your corner, especially like booster club parents. So if you're getting some pressure from the school or like you need extra nets or an extra goal or something like that, like they can be in your corner and be like, yeah, we'll easily cut a check for an extra $100 a kid in order to pay for X, just because we know it's worth it and we know it's going to go to a good spot. So again, just get it done early and just over communicate as best as you can. Because like the one thing that you don't want in a parent meeting is like a gray area.
Yep. Yep. I agree.
I think our president, speaks just as much as the coaches, if not more, too. Like
Yep.
if you're not like a big like public speaker guy, um, like our president leads, a good amount of the parent meeting of, the all the random things that aren't the X's and O's and the coaching and the things. So, lean on, you got to have a good board, right? You got to have a good president, but that could be, part of it, right? If you have a good assistant coach who's a good speaker, or if you have a good president who's a good speaker that can speak to the group, it doesn't necessarily have to just be the head coach, speaking, through the whole thing.
Yeah. Yep. No doubt. I agree. Um, Kind of looking at the lacrosse piece, you can kind of start to look at the breakdown of your opponents. I think for us in Minnesota, it's our section is probably the most important. Yes, conferences are you're going to play those teams, and conference titles are a great, goal and source of pride, but your section is ultimately your road to the state tournament. And so that's where I would start to say kind of what does our section look like? Are we the favorite? Are we the underdog? Who do we have to beat to get to where we want? Who's standing in our way? Try to identify those big section rivals that will ultimately stand in your way. And if you can get kind of a head start on, you're not going to be able to scout the offense that they run or the defense because you're going to want to see current film on that, but you can start to get a little bit of a scouting report on personnel, or kind of maybe what their schedule looks like in comparison to yours, and kind of do that. And then, I'll have Sean talk a little bit on this as well, but kind of identifying your or your schedule pressure points and like, where our litmus tests are, what do we have to get through, where and when should we be talking about certain things, and kind of look at your own schedule and how you want to manage the season. I know I early on in my career didn't do a good job of this, and like every game was the national championship game and I had to win it, and it was like, okay, like it's a long season, it's a marathon, every game is long, every season is long. Like, yes, we want to win every game, but it's not life or death until you get into the playoffs. Like, we can live to die another day, and kind of understanding the length of the season emotionally, I think is important.
Yeah, and like kind of going back to the whole scouting returning talent, like to Ted's point, like you don't know what scheme they're going to run in the spring of 26. But what I would like to do in this like 3 to 5 month window is that, again, like we're coming off the summer season, we're coming off some like the fall tournament stuff. A lot of these kids do have highlight videos on YouTube. So I mean, like we can see that, like, hey, this kid grew 2 inches and suddenly he has a lefty shot. Like, okay, that's something to keep in mind. Like so, just kind of looking at like those key returners for those section rivals. And again, not saying that it's going to be like the be all end all come April, May, but just knowing that like we can kind of expect some stuff from a handful of players. And again, like with the pressure points in the schedule, everybody has those weeks where it's like 3 games in 5 days, where it's like a Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, or God forbid, like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and you don't have a Sunday practice. So you have to get everything on a Saturday. So just knowing like those kind of stretches and how we can kind of like back into maybe some of that game planning, knowing that, you have a team like, I'm just going to say like a Benilde St. Margaret's coming up like the following week. Can we get some install in the week prior? Not telling the kids how we're doing it, but just knowing that like we know that we're going to see something similar here, and just kind of like starting to like, pull some levers to kind of get ready for it, because we're only going to have, a 1 to 2 day turnaround, like once we get into the following week.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's a really high level thing to start thinking about ahead of time, that again you could kind of not think about going into the season and be okay, but to be able to think about it early, it's going to set your team up for success later on down the line. Logistics, I think this stuff 3 to 5 months is probably like the deadline for some of this stuff. I would say if you can do it earlier, great, especially equipment orders. Like, you never know. They can say 6 weeks and it could be 6 months. Earlier is probably better. Obviously, bus schedules, you're kind of at the mercy of administration on when and how they want to do that, and when you can, get those scheduled out. But again, if you can have some of that information, the earlier you can get that information to the kids and to families to plan for like when and how they're going to get their child somewhere, and then coaches as well. If they're working full-time jobs, if they have families of their own, your assistant coaches, like, do I need to be at a 3 p.m. bus? That's going to conflict with things during the weekday. I think that's important to get out. I added this one, like the food plan for away games. Um, Sounds silly. You'd think like high school kids, they can just manage themselves. No, they cannot. So, um, like something we do at Farmington that I love, the Booster Club, every away game, every bus ride, there is food provided. Subway sandwiches, Jimmy John's, something hopefully not gonna, kill them in the game, but something quote unquote light. But then we don't have to have anxiety about it and think about it all week at practice. Because if we have a bus ride on a Thursday game at 3 o'clock, the kids will be worried about it on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday about what they're going to eat on the way home. And then parents will be calling you about what is my child going to eat? How, so just have a plan for that. It takes a lot of stress off you as a coach. And I think it's a pretty minimal investment from a fundraising perspective to get, if you have 3 or 4 kind of longer bus ride games, have a food plan and it's dialed in and a parent will take care of it. At least in our program, parents are happy to do it, and we're locked in and everybody's excited about the away game because they get a Subway sandwich. Um, kind of into that more kind of, again, back to lacrosse stuff, the drill library, the install calendar, something we talked about in our coordinator U course, but start to look at those first 10 to 12 days of the season. Again, I'm speaking from Minnesota perspective. We have a very condensed season, so we only have 4 or 5 real practices before that first real game. So having that install calendar the first 2 weeks of here's when our tryouts are. I know, Sean, you mentioned spring break. Is that going to be a factor? For a lot of programs, it is. Are you going to let kids be gone? Are you saying if you miss, you're cut? Like, what is the plan there? But assume you're not going to have everybody for spring break days, if that's a factor. But specifically, kind of looking backwards, if your first game is on this date, what do you want to have installed for that first game? Certainly, it won't be everything, but you want to have the basics. And you kind of have to then plan that out looking backwards from, the start of the season through tryouts and then however many real practices you get. And you got to be really efficient and organized, or else you get to your first game and you're like, all we've done is 4-on-3s and ground ball drills, and we haven't done anything else. Oops. Anything else to add on that? I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but I don't know.
I think it's good.
6 to 8 weeks now. We're kind of getting into that what I would call preseason, like starting to feel real. The season's around the corner. Have that parent meeting, that aforementioned parent meeting. Have it if you can have it 8 weeks, that's great. And get it, like we talked about clarity. Talk about that tryout process. Talk about spring break if that's going to be an issue. Equipment orders. And PMAC said your president of your board or your speaker for your board may have a good chunk of this meeting to talk about what day they're doing the fundraiser blitz, what day the apparel orders need to be due, when are pictures. You could certainly delegate that to someone who's managing all that. But all that stuff needs to get out in the open and scheduled, again, for parents to be prepared to, get their child where they need to go. But I would also start to schedule coaches meetings. You got to start now working with your staff with some of those things you worked on, months ago of what do we have returning in our depth chart. Now you got to work with your staff on putting your plan together. What are we going to do this year? What are we going to run? How, who do we have coming back? What do we want to do? Do we want to keep it the same? Do we want to change it? I think you want to get probably multiple meetings on the calendar, but for sure one, you got to talk about it. And if you can do some offline, then that's good. But anything on coaches meetings that you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, like this is kind of like taking into effect, like you're likely already coach, like you're already like texting or calling your staff like beyond 6 to 8 weeks. But for me, I've always liked, getting guys into a room, like whether it's a classroom at the school and like hashing stuff out for like an hour or two, just like order some pizzas, or just like going to like a local bar and restaurant and just like drawing stuff up on napkins, like moving salt and pepper shakers around, just to kind of like get the brain moving. Just because again, I'm looking at different stuff than the head coach, and the head coach is looking at different stuff than the offensive coordinator. And we can finally all kind of come together and sort of like gel together. Like, oh, I saw this drill on YouTube, or this was a great Instagram thing, and just kind of bringing that all together, just knowing that like, hey, not only can we start, to your point before, Ted, having that install like library, that drill library, but also just kind of thinking like, hey, this would be really great to work on with the young guys in captains practices. Like we can bring this to the booster club or to the captains and they can bring it to them. Just again, just kind of just to your point, just getting everyone on the same page.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And setting up that communication platform, I think is another big one that probably is like program wide from player to parent, or sorry, coach to parent, coach to player, and then coach to coach. Like how are we going to do this? As a head coach, y- if you don't systemize it, every problem and every person is going to come to you for everything. So set yourself up to have a medium that everybody understands, like when and where and how they're going to communicate and what the reasonable response time is. Um, I've seen this play out personally, but with other coaches on like, call me anytime you have a problem, or if you have anything, let me know. And that's the communication platform. And, they'll take a screenshot of their phone and they have 750 missed text messages or awaiting text messages. And it's like, you can't be you can't be an efficient coach with that much coming in, that much stimulus coming in. And so, yeah, setting up the group me, or if you have a separate email box or whatever that platform is and communicate that, I think is huge. Um, getting your captains practices and winter league stuff going, that will probably already be scheduled with your dome time and things, but checking in with your captains on how that's going, and or any off-season coaches, and then finalize that tryout schedule. I think again, you want to make sure you have a clear communication to the parents and the players of like what we're looking for. But I think with the staff, on making sure that they understand, like, hey, on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, like this is what you're going to need to bring to the table, and you're going to run a station, or you're going to be watching these guys. And then I think, Sean, you added this one, preparing for difficult conversations. Difficult conversations suck, but they're a reality of coaching. And if you can kind of maybe get ahead of some of these things and create a plan in your head of like, okay, if I have to cut this kid or whatever, is there a manager spot available? Is there a role they can play on the team that at least softens that blow a little bit? We had a kid at Farmington last year that was a senior, and he was a great kid. He just wasn't going to crack the lineup, and we kind of stressed about it for a while, and then just offered him a manager spot, and he did a great job. He loved it. Huge piece of the team. I think he had more fun being a manager and stats guy and hype guy than he did being a player, honestly. And so it was like, hey, like, let's create those potential solutions before we have those conversations, and kind of mentally prepare for those.
Yeah, regarding the difficult conversations, I really think it kind of depends on the kid. Like, like maybe they had their eyes on varsity. Like, will they accept like a JV leadership role? If that's not the case, then sadly, they may choose not to
Yeah.
pursue continue to play with the team. But yeah, Ted, to your point, we had something very similar. Like my last year at Benilde, like we had essentially like a fifth attackman that was never going to crack the lineup. And they're like, hey, buddy, you want to be a manager? And like we gave him the coach's gear. Like he was like riding with the coaches on the bus. He was a part of the staff, and he absolutely loved it. He just crushed it.
Yeah. Uh, a message in the group chat here, or in the chat, about this, that you have to have difficult conversations with the coaching staff as well. Um, you know, like who's responsible for what, and also in Minnesota, with the sections, only three coaches can be on the sideline, and a lot of us have. There's a lot more than three coaches involved in the success of a program. So you make it to state, or even sections. I guess you make your section tournament. Who's sitting up in the press box, who's sitting in the stands. That can be hard because it can feel like a demotion. Maybe it is a demotion. I don't know how it is. I don't view it as one, but I could see that being one. Um, I think it's and the particular message here just said it's better to have that conversation early, and again, prepare for that, and again, try to create a solution versus it being dropped on somebody late, and then you got distractions at the end of your season. So, it's a great call out. Anything else on that?
Yeah, like is there like any examples to this that we could like maybe talk about? Like obviously in all of this is like being proactive, right? Like having forthright conversations, setting expectations, but Any like any examples to this topic with, within staffs throughout the years that, you guys have been coaching a long time?
Um, I know from my experience that we've never really had the conversation about who like the odd man out coach was going to be on the section roster. And then it like just kind of has to happen like the day before. And like everybody's like an adult and is like, okay, like whatever. And it hasn't been a problem, but I kind of, yeah, I think now that I look back on it, it's like, maybe we should have had like a plan at that coaches meeting to say like, here's what's going to happen. But I don't know. I think it's, yeah, I mean, I think it's just something that has to come up early and just say like, if, once we make it to sections, like this is our three. And then obviously if someone can't go or whatever, then here's the person that's going to sub for that person or whatever. I guess that's how I would do it.
Yeah, I mean, like speaking for myself, like joining the Edina staff like this past year, I just laid it, I just put it out there right away. Like I'll sit in the stands. Like I'm the new guy. Like I'll sit in the stands. Like I will help as much as I can. I will take copious notes while up there and deliver them at halftime. But again, me being the new guy on staff, like I will be in the stands. So sometimes it's like you just have to put ego aside and just lay on the sword, if you will. But again, the conversations have to be had.
Has there
Um,
been, have you ran into anything like other issues where maybe somebody wants to run a certain defense, or they think, hey, we should run this on offense against Farmington because, whatever, like where, maybe it's coming from not the coordinator and it's bugged, bumped people the wrong way. Anything, obviously in Minnesota, this is a specific thing for like the sideline stuff, but
Hmm.
how about game planning and other things that, other interactions a staff might have?
Yeah. So again, kind of going back to last year, like Kyle was a defensive coordinator. I was a defensive assistant. Like for me, I always deferred to him. Like we would like talk just openly on the sideline about some stuff. We would bounce things off each other, and ultimately we would just come to a consensus. Now, when it comes to like overall team stuff, I mean, there's a hierarchy for a reason, and the head coach has the veto power, and like you have to understand that. And like if you have a disagreement, then you do it behind closed doors and not in front of the team. And then like yeah, you can hash some stuff out if you need to, but ultimately like on game day, if the head coach wants something, yeah, you can try to make your point, but don't make it about you. I'll just put it that way.
yeah, I mean, I have an example. I'm going to try to be somewhat vague here. But I know a few years ago, there some of the players didn't like some of the plays that were being called and the schemes that were being called by one of the other coaches. And then they were like telling the other coach or me, like, we don't like that system. So then it was like, okay, like now I'm stuck in the middle. Like the players don't like what so and so is doing, but they're telling me and not him. Now I have to go tell him that the players don't like. So it was like this triangle of like he said, she said. And again, I think that's where hierarchy becomes important because like if that's clear ahead of time, you can go to that other coach and say like, hey, like I love that you're excited and that you're calling plays and you're involved in the game, but like we need one voice on the sideline. And like I'm gonna call the player, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator is the one that's gonna be shouting out the instructions. Like we can't have four different people yelling four different things. And so it was a tough conversation, but like it was pretty quick because it was like, hey, this is the hierarchy. This is who's in charge of that. And that coach was like, okay, yeah, I get it. I'll be quiet. So um yeah, difficult conversation, but luckily for me it didn't stem into something further. Parent meeting 101. I didn't really know where to put this slide, so I'll kind of jump through it quick, but like this is all logistical stuff, like setting expectations for your program, your season over your schedule, maybe your goals. Like, I mean, obviously, I think there's some obvious goals, but like maybe like like what's important to you as a coach. Like, I want kids to become better people, or I want them to have fun, like those have fun or enjoy the experience. Like, I think it's important to communicate that to your team. Even if it's like cheesy stuff, I think if that's who you are and what is important to your program, put it on there. And then like expectations for like commitment, behavior, effort, those types of things. I think put it on paper so that at least when you get to halfway through the season and you have to have a conversation with somebody, they're like, "Oh, you never told me I needed to like work hard or show up to practice every day." It's like, "Yeah, actually I did put it on paper. It is in writing and we had it at the meeting." "Well, I didn't come to the meeting." "Okay, well, then now we have a problem." Um, I think this one is probably more of a board member one, but the financial breakdown again, how much is it going to cost to play? What are the fundraising expectations? Are there optional things that they can buy or not buy? Communication protocol, we talked about that. How will you update? How can they reach you? Volunteer opportunities. Get the best salesperson that you have on your board to do this one. Team meals, who's going to be in charge of those away games, hospitality, all those what do they call pasta feeds before a game? Who's going to be in charge of those? Photography, team pictures,
Hey,
who's
what's worse, the parent meeting or photo day?
Picture day by far.
and then transportation. I think more importantly, like what's your policy on transportation or what's the school's policy? Away game, do they have to ride the bus? Can they go home with a parent? Can they not go home with a parent? If they do they have to tell you? Do they have to submit a note? You're dealing with children here, so you can't just have it be a free for all on a away game and have kids just leaving the field. That's going to put you in a bad spot. So having like clear expectations on that. And then if you have eighth graders in your program, and that don't go to the high school and your practices at the high school, like how are they going to get there? Or how do your younger players get to off-season captains practices? Like who can they ask? Captains or upperclassmen, are they responsible to give them rides? I think those are all sources of anxiety for parents on you joining a high school sport. Academic expectations and support systems, I think are important. What's your standard? What are you expecting? What's the school's policy if there is one? Um, and then kind of a code of conduct, absences, what's that policy going to be if someone has to miss something, spectator behavior, coach behavior on the sideline, social media is a real thing now too. So, again, put it in writing and have it there and out there and could talk about it so that at least the excuse of, well, I didn't know that we couldn't say that, isn't like going to be an objection that they can, uphold. Anything else on parent meeting?
I mean, yeah, I mean, like I'll kind of come back to it again. Like the biggest thing, just over communicate. Just again, like yes, you're gonna have the meeting. Yes, people are gonna miss it. Send an email, send a follow-up email, just to ensure that like it's there. You did all that you could. Like you can only, I know the saying is you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. But you at least did your part to get this information in front of them, and like what they do with it. I mean, ultimately that's on them. But again, you can kind of hold their feet to the fire, saying like, hey, you know, Timmy missed practice yesterday. It's not an excused absence, so therefore he has to sit a quarter. Like that's just what it is. So
Yeah.
just little things like that.
Yeah. One thing I didn't add, and now I'm kind of, as I'm thinking about this, that maybe is on your 6 to 8 month out and probably monthly, if you're a head coach, is meeting with your AD regularly. Um, nothing can derail what you're trying to do as a program with friction with your administration. So if you can get, again, you don't have to get special treatment or anything like that, but having a good rapport with your athletic director is going to make a lot of things easier for you. It's going to help you as a head coach. So like especially if you're a new head coach, like maybe go set a meeting and get to know that person because that athletic director is going to have the final say in a lot of things that you do. And if they support lacrosse, you're going to have a much better experience. So wanted to throw that in there. Um,
Retweet.
yeah.
Yeah, not to mention they can also provide air cover for like some like I'll just say like those like bad apple parents, if you will. Like, all right, hey, go to the AD if you want to, but he's in my corner. So
Yeah.
have fun.
Yeah, for sure. Um, Coaches meeting 101. Um, this this is something that I've personally tried to get a lot better at, and just understand a lot more. And like you said, we get in a room and we're going to talk about this theoretical ride we're going to run for 2 hours. And then we actually didn't do anything except for spitball crazy ideas for 2 hours and waste everybody's time. So, your coaches meeting, same kind of thing, seasons overview, the schedule, the goals, the expectations. I think that's obvious. But identifying the team needs, like what needs to get done day, week, month, and like who's going to be responsible for executing those things, I think are really important. Um, but something I heard recently and that I really like, and as a head coach, you have to be willing and able to delegate responsibilities. If you try to do everything yourself and control everything yourself, you are going to be a bottleneck, and it's going to, like, there is going to be a diminishing return. So, like, I think one of the most important things as a head coach is figuring out who is on your staff and what are they good at. That's a good start. Now, kind of going a little deeper, what does each coach love to do? Like if I'm on a staff with Sean, I should have a conversation, be like, if you could do anything for a half hour at practice, what would it be? And if he said, I just really love sliding and off ball schemes, then he should probably be in charge of that, if it works out. Or if Coach Ted loves doing shooting drills, like I'll be the shooting coach then, and I'll run shooting drills. Um, and like I'm sure we all have to do things that we don't like to do, but let's try to give coaches things they love to do, especially as high school coaches. Like we're not in it for the paycheck. So we might as well make it fun while we're there. And if we're good at it and we love to do it, then that's a pretty good reason to have somebody be assigned that specific task. Um, and obviously, there could be some hierarchy things. If someone comes in and has more seniority, then maybe they don't get to do that this year, but in the future. But knowing your staff is important. And then kind of how can all those people bring their strengths to the table? And I don't know, maybe you guys are different, but I've found a lot of times 95% of it sorts itself out. It's like, I like doing these 5 things and I like doing these 5 things. It's like, great. 95% of the work is handled at this point and we're all happy with it. And then maybe you got to do one thing you don't like to do. Anything to add on just kind of identifying roles and assigning roles. And then I guess maybe as a head coach, stepping away and letting people do their job.
I think the biggest thing to like assign or at least like know going into the season, again, like 6 to 8 weeks out, ideally longer, would be clears and rides. Because more often than not, that is ignored, I would say, by a lot of staffs. Just because, especially early in the season, it's really apparent. Like the good teams are good at clearing, and therefore they're going to have more possessions, and it's going to look easier for them because they can string 30 passes together and get 80 yards downfield. But again, like to your point, like for like identifying like and assigning roles, getting back to Edina this past year, Kyle was already there. He was established as a defensive coordinator. So when I came in, like we had a discussion. It's like, all right, when it comes to practice, the day to day, what are you going to help the boys with? What am I going to help the boys with? So he basically took all the polls. I took all of our D middies and our LSMs, and that's just the way it was. And then when it came to like the overall like schematic stuff, then we put our heads together and like game plan. We put together the schemes and that kind of stuff. But when it came to like the actual like development portion, polls like close defense, and then now just midfield, and then it worked extremely well for us.
Yeah, I think that's great. And if you're lucky enough to have a lot of talent on your staff, you can get pretty niche down on like you're the riding coach, like you are the riding person for the scheme. Like and really give somebody power and to develop that. Because if we're all just sitting there in the group chat worrying about sixes offense and defense all the time, and then we miss a bunch of stuff. You could even have someone be man up and someone be man down that isn't necessarily the defensive and offensive coordinator. Give them something that they can work on. And maybe you oversee it as the head coach or the coordinator and like kind of look at it and go, hey, yeah, that looks great. Or I would tweak 1 or 2 things, but you don't have to do everything yourself. And I think that's where I think coaches get burnt out and have problems is they think they have to do everything themselves, but staff wants to do the work and kind of my last point, I think PMAC has something here. As an assistant coach, figure out what you can do to support your head coach? What's the vision of the head coach, and how can you make their life better and offer to do that?
Sean had a great shout out with writing and clearing. Another role, at the varsity level for sure. But even at the younger levels, even at the lower levels, is who's running the sub box. I think it can be missed just like or forgotten about just like the ride and clear. But I think in my opinion it can make a big difference on games individually and your season overall.
That's a great call out. Just like you don't want two, three coaches shouting different orders on the offense and defense, you don't want two or three coaches all trying to sub different guys off at the same time. And if you're not in charge of the sub box, do not stand near the sub box. This is called the coach's box. It's a large area. Do not stand right at the cone that's right by the sub box. Let the sub box coach do that. I know this isn't probably maybe a slide on this particular office hours, so we can talk about this maybe in the writing and clearing section. But I like that sub box role. Who's going to handle it and really dive into it? And then similar as the parent meeting, code of conduct for the coaches, sideline behavior. If you're going to be gone, how are we going to handle that? Social media, dress code. Um, do you have a specific thing that the coaches need to wear? Do you not care? Is it Hawaiian shirts? Is it tucked in polos? Whatever it is, communicate it, because it can be a source of stress for someone that doesn't know what they need to wear. So just talk about it, or if it's just we don't have a dress code, then that's fine. Then we move on. And then communication process, like what's the group chat? Like what's the maximum amount of texts you can send in a row before you have to stop and spam the chat. I kind of use those things jokingly, but they are from personal experience. But just get everybody on the same page on like how we have to interact with each other, I think is important to talk about.
I would take a peek at the other coach's shoes. If they've got a strong shoe game, don't stand out. I've stood out in a negative way before. Pro tip.
1 to 2 weeks. The final countdown here. Sean is the GIF master here. You can kind of start to get your practice plans organized. Maybe the first 4 or 5 practices, like really, like what are we doing from 5:30 to 5:45 on the first day? Like you can start to do some pre-work, and then kind of looking at tryouts, like how many roster spots do you have? What's important to you for roster decisions? And then I really bolded this one when Sean put it down of like specific players to watch. So again, this is a personal problem with me as a coach. We get to tryouts and I'm like, man, do you believe it, guys? That superstar senior midi we have is a good lacrosse player. Man, he's a lock. It's like, yeah, no shit. Like, how about the other 30 roster spots? Like, and then you kind of miss maybe some of the younger guys you put incoming freshmen. How can you get those guys a look when they're just trying to survive the first week of their high school career? Like they're not going to go out there and jump in the front of the line and go toe to toe with the senior. But are they someone that should be evaluated for the varsity team or maybe the JV team and not the prep team? So designate like certain players that each coach can watch and like really watch them and not just get overly like fascinated about your starters that of course 99.99% of the time are locks are going to make the team. There's no decision to be made.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I like this shout out. I think it also depends on, what type of program you're in, right? Like if you're at a school like Ted or even Edina, right? Like you've got probably 3 teams, you've got big numbers, you've got to kind of level out your numbers, your rosters, your positions, right? This might look different depending on what program you're at, right? Like if you've got one, maybe 2 teams, right? Or you're in a startup program, this this specific situation might look different for you. Sean, I think it cut you off. Sorry.
No, you're good. Like one thing that I would say kind of regarding, the specific players to watch, one thing that I tend to write down at the top of like my like evaluation chart, if you will, like going into tryouts, is don't confuse familiarity with depth. Just because you know a kid, like, and you've known him for the last 3 years, doesn't mean that an opposing defensive coordinator thinks as highly of him as you do, if that makes any sense. So just because like you think like this kid's going to be a lock for second line, he's going to lead it, try to be as objective as you can. Just knowing that like he looks great for us, but is he going to scare anyone else? That kind of a thing.
As the youth development coordinator, hand up on this, right? I'm getting fired up about the freshman coming up, right? Like, oh, this guy he's been lighting up our for our youth program the last 4 years. So hand up. I might get a little too familiar, even with the young guns, coming up here.
Yeah.
Um, Operational stuff for the coaches, administrative paperwork. Did you sign the coaching contract or whatever, the paperwork, the HR paperwork to coach at the school? The rules meeting, the infamous rules meeting, online rules meeting that we all have to do in Minnesota. I don't know if other states do this. I'm sure there's something similar where you got to sit and go through the slides of, you know, not much has changed, but there's three new rules of emphasis, and we're changing three rules completely. So now I don't even know any rules left, but it's easy to forget about. And then hand up, don't be the guy that the AD emails and goes, "Hey, you're 2 weeks into the season. I technically have to keep you not. I have to take you off the sideline unless you get this done today." And so I was like, "Oh yeah, not like." I just created more work and more paperwork and time for my AD of an assistant lacrosse coach is not something that he wanted to do. So get that done. And I mean, it's every year. So rules meeting, can you get equipment and apparel and things like that distributed early? If there's an opportunity, maybe you work in the school and you can do some of that. And then, make sure you have nets. Make sure they're unlocked. Make sure there's cones. Do you have balls or are they all greasers? Just like proper equipment ready for day one so that you can hit the ground running and get something out of that first practice. Anything on operations or like kind of that week before setup.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the biggest thing in terms of like, but by that point in time, you will likely know how many kids will have registered for the team, so you can kind of have like a better idea going into tryouts, knowing that there's probably going to be like a plus minus of like 3 to 5 players. But again, the more you can get done, in the week prior, the better. Just because, especially when it comes to like the gloves, the player packs, just knowing that like when you show up to tryouts on Monday at 3:30 p.m., you're gonna be wearing this, this, and this. And like in the past, like at Champlin, like we told guys like if you don't show up in basically what we tell you to wear, that's not gonna be a good look because you're basically failing the test already. So again, like try to be as prepared as you can.
Yeah. Um, I know we're already an hour. I think we got about 15 minutes left here. I'll try to be quick, but preseason training is kind of now the second part of the presentation. Where we've kind of prepped kind of all the logistical stuff, but you might have some captains practices that your team is running, and whether it's your captains running it, maybe you hire an outside coach. How do we get the most out of those preseason practices so that when we get to the season, knowing we got to implement and install a bunch of stuff, can we be the best we can be, in that situation? I think preseason is about reps, teamwork, and chemistry. Like really, I don't care about installing schemes because that's going to change every game a little bit anyways. But I want every kid, especially if they're a multi-sport and they haven't touched their stick in a while, I want them to get as many reps as possible. I want them to meet their teammates, especially the younger guys, kind of learn who's on the team, what are they like, develop chemistry. Hey, I like enjoy this group of guys. I'm excited to come back tomorrow. I think that's important in off season training. I put quantity over quality. I know you might be like, Coach, what? Not proper shooting form? Yes, it's important. Quality is important. Doing things correctly is important, but I would much rather have a kid get 200 shots and have it maybe not be perfect than stopping a drill and getting 3 shots and having them be perfect form. Because at the end of the day, just get the ball in the back of the net or just, cover your guy, whatever it is. I think maybe comes from more of an offensive perspective than a defensive perspective, but like get them the reps so that they're engaged and they're breaking a sweat and they're having fun at the off-season practices. A great time for your team leaders to establish rapport. The captains get to know the younger players, or if they're new captains, like now they gotta face their peers in a different way. They have to say stop screwing around, or hey, let's work harder. Good chance for them to get reps as being leaders, and I think that's important, especially as you get into the season. And then honestly, one of the biggest ones for me, building excitement. Like, we're here. This is a great group of guys. We're excited to play lacrosse. We got a few weeks until the season. Like, we have a good team. All those things I think go into making that sprint that is the season better. And so I think those are kind of my big kind of 4 pillars. Anything to add on to that?
I mean, yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is just building excitement. Like you don't want I mean, because again, captain's practices, they're loose to a point because again, it's no captain wants to be like the bad guy, but
Yeah.
sometimes you do kind of have to like push a button every now and then. So if you can keep it fun and especially be like welcoming and letting like, the incoming eighth graders or freshmen like know that this is what we do, like in years past, you'll have like a captain's practice, and then maybe 1 or 2 guys will stay after to shoot some extra reps, or like just like take some extra reps, and then the following week, now there's more guys staying after to take extra reps, and then the following week, and then eventually those extra reps just kind of become like the standard, and that's how you create culture.
Yep.
So just knowing that, like this is really where you can start to like gel and like create that culture, even going into tryouts.
Yep. Um, Offensive goals, it really is stick work, shooting, and communication. Get the stick in check, work on shooting and passing and shooting. I guess we like stick work, and then communication. Like kind of the older guys should know some of the basic calls and things that we say, the language of our team. Start getting that refreshed for everybody, and then also get the younger players up to speed. And then on the defensive side, Sean and PMAC, you can add to this if you'd like, but I put stick work, positioning, and communication. So maybe not shooting per se, but just like your fundamental, on ball defense, maybe some off ball positioning, basic stuff, but we're not necessarily going to the next level of schemes here.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, like regarding the stick work, like if the defensive stick work doesn't look like clearing, you should revisit your stick work, in my opinion. So if you can like have any kind of like clearing aspect, a breakout, an overpass, starting with a ground ball, that's huge. Same thing with like positioning, again, on ball, off ball, and then just kind of getting guys used to talking because it's hard for kids these days, and not to sound like an old man here, it's hard for them to talk. So they need to get comfortable communicating to their teammates. Freshmen have to get used to telling a senior what to do. Seniors have to get used to having a freshman telling them what to do, because when you're on the field, basically like there is no hierarchy. Like it's 6 guys trying to defend, the other team from scoring.
Yeah, I think in this setting, right, in your association, off season, training, captain's practices, whatever you call it, I think you both have hit on it, right? Get as much quantity as you can, get as much reps as you can, get the young guys introduced to the program, and get it hopefully starting to look like, feel like, sound like generally what you hope for it to look like come April, right? This isn't about your top 6 starting offense to, you know, dial all in the little details. It's about getting the new guys involved, bringing the bottom up, getting the kind of the next ones, a little bit more involved, starting to set that culture, set that tone for the season. Um, this part of the off season, if your starters want to go get the quality reps, right? They're probably doing that somewhere. In this setting, it's about getting the whole program together. Whatever your motto is, whatever um, you know, your program is about, starting to get that going versus, each little detail, in my opinion.
Agreed. Here are some drills that we've all kind of put together here. Um, I think all of these are in the drill bank in the coaches community. So if you're seeing this, it's in that drill bank. If not, we'll get them added. I think there might be only a couple. But again, kind of focusing on that high rep kind of quality over quantity, starting with defensive drills. I'll kind of run through these, but you guys can add, Sean said it, stick work should maybe look like clear. So we got breakouts and overpasses, kind of that long passing, mimicking, the types of passes they're going to see in the clearing game. Princeton sliding. That is just basically a sliding recovery skeleton drill. I call it Princeton. I'm sure it's called 700 different other things. But basically just an on-ball dodge, a slide, and a recovery to the crease, or you could do it adjacent if you wanted to do it. But I think crease is the easiest. But again, just working through the language and the communication and timing of a slide and a recovery. Really basic, but hammering, you get a ton of reps doing it. Four spot approach was one of PMAC's famous or favorite drills. Just working on four cones, different spots on the field, where you're gonna or how you're gonna approach each of those spots of the field, shading. How do you want your stick? How do you want your body positioned? You can go through those things, but again, it keeps it high rep, and they're getting a bunch of touches on different spots on the field.
As you look at these, Sean, as you look at these defensive drills and talk a little bit about them, any like overarching themes or focuses that in the preseason you want your defenders generally working on?
The biggest thing, it's just like keeping it simple. I mean, like I know it can be boring at times, but it's like 9 times out of 10, like any goal is going to start with like a bad approach. It may not have been like the first approach, but like again, there's a bad approach in this half the field. We then have to slide and recover, and it just hits on the backside. So starting with the approaches, that's a huge one. Get as many ground balls as you can. Again, just especially contested ground balls, like that swarm GB's one. That's one that I threw up here. I can certainly, that's why I have the board. What I like to do with that one, it's one that like I saw in like one of those championship production Lars Tiffany videos, but basically they took just like a regular crease. Hopefully y'all can see that on the screen here. And
Yep.
what they did is they basically had like a defenseman here with 1 foot inside, a defenseman here with 1 foot inside, and then a defenseman here with 1 foot inside, and then just a line of players here. Coach would just simply drop a ball inside. They're not looking to take off hands. They're just kind of looking just to like sort of like gently check, but they're running through full speed and just getting to space and turning. That's all it is. Again, just think of it as like a paint GB. Again, shot, rebound off the goalie. It's in front. You have to run through it, pick it up, get to space, keep it easy. Again, that's the drill. That's all it is.
I like
And
that.
then for the pick play stuff, I can draw that up and share with the greater group later. But again, it seems like everybody's running 2-man stuff today, whether it's like an open 2-man set or just like high wing picks, low wing picks. You need to start establishing. And again, this kind of comes down to that communication aspect. Guys getting used to calling out picks. Guys getting used to telling their teammates, a pick is coming, you need to stay. A pick is coming, be ready to switch. Just knowing that and just kind of establishing some of those rules, especially around the net, because again, the less that coaches have to install come April, the better.
Ted, as you look at these offensive drills, any is it similar themes? Is it different? What are you seeing on the offensive side during the preseason?
Yep. Similar themes in the sense of keeping it simple. And again, the most amount of reps I can maximize, the better. And for these guys, as you can see, the espresso shooting, 32 shooting, conveyor belt shooting, it's all multiple balls, multiple lines, multiple shots per rep. Just again, trying to get as many shots in different spots as you can. Um, because again, they may have gone a long period of time without shooting. So, like, let's get as many touches as we can. And then Oakland passing, Arizona passing, and OSU lines, again, are really quick, multiple line passing drills to, again, maximize touches. That's the big thing for me. I think all of these drills are in the drill bank if you want to see them. And then team drills, it's all small sided, and I put here all position, no position. I think there's a lot of value in just taking your team, splitting them up equally by age group, and make sure you got a balance of all positions. One team's in white, one team's in dark, and running it and letting them play both sides of the ball because you can be a lot quicker on the reps. You can get way more touches, you get way more situations, and again, you're not trying to develop nuanced schematic things with your deep holes at this point or your offensive guys. You're trying to play lacrosse. So 32 sides, NASCAR, World Cup or Shark Attack, kind of a similar drill, 3v2 weaves. All of this stuff is small sided, quick rep, and again, all position, no position. You could certainly go offense versus defense if you wanted, but I think it's better to just take your group and split them and go.
And also,
Um,
and I was going to say, Ted, a lot of that stuff is like hidden conditioning because nobody wants to just run sprints during the off season. So I mean, if guys are showing maximum effort and like getting up and down the field,
yeah.
like West Jenny, like
Yep.
you're basically running sprints, guys, except you got a ball in your stick.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I added that West Jenny Sixes format at the end. Again, they're playing lacrosse, they're running, they're getting touches, they're not really thinking they're at practice. Again, it's making it fun. They're getting reps, they're getting conditioning. Those are all positives. Um, and if it looks messy or it looks kind of silly or screwing around, who cares? They're playing lacrosse or with their team building culture. And these are all simple drills that captains could run or an off-season coach could run. So, these are just some examples that we have in the drill bank. You might have other small sided stuff that you like to do it. I would refrain from doing a full field clearing and face off drill. I would refrain from just doing one on ones and having 15 guys standing and watching a freshman get beat down by a senior D pole. Try to just keep it small sided, high energy, start everything with a ground ball. You can get the most out of a $300 an hour dome slot. That's kind of my viewpoint on the off season stuff. This is not my slide, so tryouts. Who added this one?
Yeah, I'll jump to this one since I know we're kind of running up on time here. So the day has come, right? Basically, we did all this planning. Now what? Just know everyone knows that a championship isn't won on March 30th. But you can set a tone. That comes, and again, like as a staff, just knowing that what the expectations are or what the team should expect. When it comes to me like getting after a player, it's really coming down to only a handful of factors, and the biggest one is effort. If guys are just like jogging out there or just thinking they're too cool for school, don't love that. Okay, so you need to like nip that in the bud pretty much right away. So again, just like the expectations of competing every rep, communicating, and encouraging your teammates. Like if somebody makes a great play, somebody has a great shot, and the sideline is quiet, again, coach them up. Okay, let them know that like if one of us scores, we all score. That kind of stuff. And again, most of us have like 3 days of tryouts. First day, it's always a little chaotic. Someone's going to forget gloves. A coach is going to forget a whistle. Something's going to happen. But that day two, when you kind of start to separate, the wheat from the chaff and get some of that clarity, it's like, all right, we have group one, now we have group two, and then lastly, like day three is typically competition. You basically have most of the teams pretty much ironed out, and then you can really start to get after it and compete. That's essentially the purpose of that one.
Love it. Well, hour and 15 went a little long. But I think it's all good stuff. It's kind of the boring stuff, but I think as I've gotten older as a coach, it's stuff that is really important. The logistics, the planning, the preparation of your season, and realizing like you don't get to do the fun on-field coaching schematic stuff if you don't do this stuff ahead of time and get on the same page with your staff and get on the same page with your parents and players. It will make, once you do that, it makes the experience on field a lot better. So we kind of wanted to start here. Um, I think the next three office hours, so number 2, 3, and 4, are going to be much more lacrosse X's and O's focused. But we felt like this was important to talk about. If you have questions, you can reach out, throw something in the community. We have a bunch of people in there that can reply to it because I certainly don't have all the answers. But, you know, if you got through this whole thing, thanks for watching. We really like to talk about lacrosse, so it does not surprise me that we went over the hour set limit. But anything else, gentlemen, on office hours number 1?
No, I mean, like Ted, I think you pretty much hit it on the head. Like this is, I mean, it's pretty vanilla. It can be boring at times, but ultimately, like the more you do in the off season, the more success you're gonna have between April and June. It's pretty much that simple.
Yeah, this isn't like the sexy stuff, right? But um the more you do of this, like it does somehow long term translate to wins on the field somehow, some way.
Yep. All right, gentlemen, have a good night. Anyone who's listening, watching, thank you, and we will talk to you next. Office hours is February 19th. Yes, February 19th. Um, so we'll look forward to seeing you then. And thanks for tuning in.
So you guys